Well, hello there, fellow geeks and geekettes. Welcome to yet another video of Psycho Seb. Now, I thought that I would give you my opinions and my take on a very contemporary topic. Now, everybody knows in the world that the situation isn't very easy today. There is a pandemic in the world. A lot of people are getting sick. A lot of things are closed and shut. There are quarantines. People are rightly encouraged to self-isolate and to do all this social distancing thing. But that also means that a lot of things are changing slowly. A lot of companies, a lot of factories had to be shut down temporarily, probably, but nevertheless they had to be. Well, and this current situation has also affected the comic book industry, and since this is a geek and nerd-oriented channel, I thought that I could talk about that very briefly, hopefully very briefly. Don't want this video to be 3 hours long. Now, I do not want to go into too much detail, nor talk about politics or argue about anything. It's just my opinion, my take on things. Just do take into consideration the fact that I'm not an expert on market, on finances, on distribution, anything like that. I am just a simple doctorate student and a teacher and a fan of literature and art in general. And a huge portion of this is devoted to the American comic books and more recently also to manga and all that is connected with it, be it film and TV series interpretations of this or that comic book or manga, or other incarnations and representations of my favorite characters, like in video games and novels, films, and so on and so forth. And as well, as you can see behind me, memorabilia and action figures and statues, replicas, so on and so forth. Now, but from what I can see and from what I could read and understand, I have quite a clear picture in my mind what's going on and what might happen in the near future. Now, everybody knows, every comic book fan knows actually, that the two big publishers, Marvel and DC, had to stop their production and had to stop sending comic books to comic book stores because obviously all the comic book stores throughout the United States of America and Britain had to be closed for obvious reasons. Now, this same thing applies to the independent publishers, most of them, not all of them. I believe that IDW, Image, Dark Horse, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that those stopped their production as well. As a matter of fact, all the creators, or most of the creators, were told to put their pencils down because nobody would be able to pay them, right, for their product, for their art, for their works of art. Now, on the other hand, this thing has not affected manga industry, nor has it affected, as I have come to know, the production of the British comic book magazine 2000 AD. Now that suggests a couple of things. That suggests that the comic book industry was or has been going to hell for some time. We all know that. Please do not pretend that you don't know about it or that it is not true. It is true. The modern comic book production has been declining, both as far as quality and well, not quantity, but both as far as quality goes and as far as the amount of money that they were making, the comic book publishers. Now, it is a fact that in America, a lot of comic book productions still relied on the comic book issues, the single floppies, as they are called, each and every week, comic book fans went to comic book shops to get their new comic books, to get their new comic book floppies. What has been happening less and less, this needs to be said, for the reasons I have already mentioned. The decline of quality, that's quite obvious. And also, it needs to be said that more and more people, more and more fans and readers have been venturing into the realm of collected editions. People have been buying more trade paperbacks, more hardbacks, more omnibuy or omnibuses, which are these huge, thick collected editions. More so than they have been buying the single comic book issues. Now, this is not a news for me being a European. Now, you have to take into consideration the fact that this mainly concerns the United States of America, because in continental Europe, we are not really used to comic book shops where we would go each and every week to get comic book floppies, comic book single issues. It just doesn't happen here. Europe has also a very long comic book tradition, mainly France and Belgium. But comic books have been becoming popular all around Europe for the last, 20 years, more and more. That's true. But still, the fact remains that we, the Europeans, the continental Europeans, have been mainly reading and buying and producing graphic novels or comic books that were published as a collected edition or a book of around 100 and more pages just at once. We were not, or we are not, as Europeans, really used to reading and writing comic book issues. The situation might be slightly different in Britain. I know that in Britain they have comic book shops, comic book stores, where they used to get American comics every week, and fans did go there. Now, this situation with the comic book floppies might also change in the United States of America in the future. We know that DC Comics, they have kind of changed their deal with Diamond, who was the sole distributor of comic books and memorabilia all around the world, basically. And they stopped sending anything to anybody. They said that they would not distribute any comics from DC, Marvel, and other publishers, simply because of the financial reasons, right? They would be selling things to comic book shops, and the comic book shops would only be receiving the comic books, but they wouldn't be able to be selling the comics because they are closed and nobody would be going to the shops, obvious, right? So they stopped sending and distributing the products, which for maybe quite understandable reasons kind of pissed off Marvel and DC and other publishers. They weren't warned beforehand. Diamond just did it like abruptly. Well, that means that, of course, as I said, some of the publishers got a bit pissed off, mainly DC, who then decided that they would try to find different means of distribution of their comic books. Now they have released some comic books digitally, and there are discussions in the world, in the comic book realm, that the digital comics might become more often and more frequent than they have been so far. That's of course one of the things that might very well happen, that people will be reading more digital comics. Now, I don't know very many fans who would prefer digital comics over printed comics. There are people who prefer to read digitally, but still, it is my firm belief that there are more people who prefer to read paper books than digital books. Now, now I am looking at different articles from mainly Bleeding Fool and Newsarama. I will provide the links down below in the description. Now, Marvel has announced that they would start releasing comic books again on May the 27th, and they announced their schedule through July the 8th, right? So they will probably, they are saying right now, Marvel's say that they will start releasing new comics on May the 27th, which is Wednesday, obviously. And they would release Amazing Spider-Man 43, Avengers 33, Marauders 10, Star Wars Dr. Aphra 1, Venom 25, and then the upcoming weeks there will be more titles. Now, DC have so far released things like Superman, The Man of Tomorrow 3, Batman Gotham Knights 3, Wonder Woman Agent of Peace 3, Aquaman Deep Dives, la da da, but all of that has been released digitally. And there have been, of course, people, mainly creators, who, as I said, because they have been told to put their pencils down, they have been trying to find different means of, fulfilling their creativity. More and more creators are asking people to send their money to things like Indiegogo and Kickstarter and things like that, so they can produce their own, create-own comic books, which is quite understandable. And I think that if they are good creators, famous creators, they will get enough money to be able to produce their own comics. Now, Jim Starlin himself, and that article comes from Leading Fool, says, or the title of the article says, Comics Legend Jim Starlin sees the end of floppy single comics. Now, Jim Starlin is an amazing author who, among many, many, many other characters, created Thanos. And he is about to start writing and drawing his or another of his Dreadstar stories, which is his own created own thing. And they asked him why didn't he go back to Marvel and DC, and why he decided to publish or really write his Dreadstar comic in a thick volume, not in floppies, because he wants to do that. Well, and he says, I don't think the pamphlet-type comic books are all that financially viable these days. They help with the printing of the big companies, but usually the smaller runs, they tend to lose money on these pamphlets. They normally make up their cost with a hardcover graphic novel type format. Right. I've got things shown from the 1970s that are still in print because of the graphic novel format. Things change. I think doing Kickstarter is a thing that a lot of freelance writers and artists are going to think about doing down the line, because once we are done with this quarantine thing, it will be a whole different world out there. This may be the most advantageous way to go. Now, and this basically sums up what I think. I completely and absolutely agree with Jim Starlin, and I had thought so. It had been my own personal opinion even before I read the article. I don't know what's going to happen for sure. Nobody knows. The only thing that we could consider to be certain is that many things will change forever, or at least for a long time in the world. And a lot of things will change for a long time for the comic book industry. And I think that, firstly, I don't think that the comic book industry is going to disappear, is going to fail, because people want to read comic books. People want to read comic books. People want to write comic books. People want to enjoy the comics. They want to enjoy the medium. They have wanted to do so for a long time, and I don't think they are suddenly going to stop wanting to reading comics. So there will always be some sort of comic book production. There will always be some sort of comic book industry. Now, the format and the way of how comic books will be written and published and distributed, that's another question that might change, of course, and it will very probably change. It will be very likely that we will see even a bigger increase in the production of digital comics, of graphic novels, which will come out in the collected format without comic book issues first being published in floppies. and that we will be seeing more deluxe and prestige format editions, and that we will be seeing more authors, writers and artists doing things like Kickstarters and Indiegogos and things like that. It is very likely that we will be seeing more comic books in regular comic book shops and things like Walmart and things like that. It is very likely that we will see the decrease in the number of comic book shops in the United States of America. I don't think that those shops are going to die out completely, because they will still be selling collected editions, and they will be selling collectibles like Funko Pop figures and statues, and just things that you see behind me, right? But I think that if something changes, if changes are bound to happen in the United States of America, the situation there might start resembling the situation in Europe, and that people will be reading collected editions more than they are reading floppies. But that, once again, it's nothing new for me, right? If I want to read a series week by week or month by month, if I just can't wait for the collected edition, if I love some series so much that I just can't wait, I have to buy the comic digitally, because I'm from the Czech Republic. I can't go to a comic book store and buy the comic each and every week. I can pre-order them, but the shipping would be very expensive, and I would get the comics very, very late, and that's why it is more advantageous for me to just wait for the collected edition, or just buy 1 or 2 titles digitally each and every month. So no changes there for Europeans. The only change really that might happen will be concerning the United States of America, and I think the changes are going to happen, but I'm not saying that the changes will necessarily be catastrophic. I only know, or I think that we can be quite sure about the fact that things will be different, and it will never be the same. But we have to take into consideration the fact that the comic book industry in the United States of America has been declining for a long time, and that people have been arguing and fighting and bitching about comic book production for a long time. For that reason or another, I'm not going to go there. So this might be positive, the change. People, and then the publishers and the writers, the creators, maybe mainly the publishers and the editors, might finally realize that if they want to sell their comic books in this or another way, this or that format, doesn't matter if it is a floppy or a collected edition, they need to rely on good creators and on quality, and that they need to hire their writers and their inkers and pencilers and colorists on, because of their talent and because of their ability to write and draw comics, not because of anything else. Because everything else is extremely unimportant if you want to make good comics. If you want to make good comics, you need to have a good writer and a good artist. That's it. That's the gist of it. So, to sum it up, things are going to change, but the changes don't necessarily need to be bad. It doesn't need to be catastrophic. The comic book industry will not die. I don't think that it will die, but it will be very different. Might resemble the situation in Europe. Now, a long video already, so I'll cut it short right here and right now, and I will ask you about your opinion. If you are from the United States of America, if you are from Europe, if you are from Australia, New Zealand, Africa, Asia, doesn't matter. Tell me your opinion. What do you think? Is the comic book industry going to end? And if some changes happen, what they are going to be? Or what are they going to be? What changes do you want to see? What changes you don't want to see? And have you been used to going to comic book store every week, or have you been enjoying your collected editions more than your floppies? Now, please do share your own opinion, and don't forget to dislike this video if you don't like it, or like this video if you like it. Subscribe to this unimportant channel of an unimportant geek talking about unimportant things if you like. And I will say goodbye to you, my friends. See you soon, and bye.